Hello, and welcome into Top Shelf. I'm your host, Carl Mogline, along with Nick Bugadas, here to preview the NHL season with you. But before we go, let's talk about a little bit about ourselves. Nick, you first.
All right. Well, I'm out here in New Jersey. I don't know if Carl can hear me over there in Oregon. I'm a huge Pittsburgh Penguins fan, so you'll probably see that homerness pretty prevalent in our picks today. That's pretty much it, really. I love Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, in the stereotypical Penguin manner. Alrighty, and moving on to myself, I'm Carl Mogline, and first show at Top Shelf. Very excited you are here. I'm from Oregon. I'm a Sharks fan. I actually play hockey, which is weird for living in Oregon. Before we move on, there will be a Facebook page, probably by the time you listen to this, so go like that. It'll be Top Shelf on hockey, maybe Top Shelf on Infinity Sports Network if it's not Top Shelf. Who knows? But before we move on, we're both very amusing on Twitter. So, Nick, what are you at on Twitter?
At Nick Bogadas. If you can't spell Bogadas, it's Bougades. Drop that follow.
That's not that bad to spell, actually. For the difficulty of that name, it's pretty easy to spell.
Yeah, I know, right?
And then because my last name is really difficult to spell, it's Mogline. Don't try.
I can't spell it.
Yeah, you really can't. It's at Carl_PM. By the way, it's Carl with a K. If you search it with a C, you'll probably end up with a parody account made by somebody else on this network. I can't promise anything. But
I'm not going to confirm or deny if I made that account.
Let's hope it's a deny. But basically what we're going to do for you here today, division by division, team by team, we're going to view those winners of those divisions, preview some of the biggest trophies of the year, conference finals, and of course the big one, who's going to hoist the Stanley Cup. All right, moving in, we're going to start head first into the Atlantic Division. Now, this is a division that has the Boston Bruins, the Buffalo Sabres, the Detroit Red Wings, the Florida Panthers, the Montreal Canadiens, and the Ottawa Senators. Oh, did I mention?
And the Tampa Bay Lightning. Let's not count Florida.
Yes, and the Maple Leafs. The
Maple Leafs are barely a team. So
the Maple Leafs made the playoffs last year.
Barely.
Not barely.
Okay, whatever.
The Maple Leafs were solid last year. We'll get to the Maple Leafs, all right? We're going to go through this division in alphabetical order, talk about what they did last year, their additions, their losses. You know what? That's the big deal with these teams. All right, and that means we're going to start with the Boston Bruins really quickly here. Last year, 54-19-9, first in the Atlantic. They got eliminated by Montreal in the second round by a hot goaltender known as Carey Price. We'll talk about him later. But they got a great goaltender of their own in Tuukka Rask. This offseason, no big additions, but they did lose forward Jerome McGinley, one of the best forwards of his time. So that's a big loss, although he was getting a little bit old. All right, so after finishing last season, they were incredible in the regular season. Fantastic. But they did have it's a bad playoff run. I mean, you're getting kicked out in the second round when you had the most points. You don't want that to happen. But Zdeno Chara is still a Norris caliber defender. That means he's one of the best defenders in the league. And Tuukka Rask is still one of the best goalies in the league. So I'm going to ask you a question, Bugadas. Do you think they're going to be about as good as last year, better, or worse?
I think they'll be about the same. I don't think they really didn't get anybody, and like you said, they lost to Gimla. So I don't see them getting much better, but I think they'll still be at the top of the division. Also important to note, they do not have a lot of cap room to work with, so look for them to make a move early.
Okay, and yeah, you're right, they do. That is a big story. They don't have a ton of cap space. You know what? I'm going to say they're going to drop just a little bit. I don't think they'll be I think they're going to have issues being quite as good as they were last year. I mean, you're talking about a team that in regulation lost 19 games, only 9 overtime losses. I mean, that's a really high mark, and I think they're just going to be a little bit below that. I think they're going to be second or third in this division, not quite first. But we'll get to division winners later. All right, that brings us to the Buffalo Sabres. And I mean, let's be honest, they're kind of the laughingstock of this division. I mean, they were 8th in the Atlantic. There's 8 teams. 21, 41, and 10. They missed the playoffs, obviously. But it was actually a pretty good offseason. Only one big loss, and that was Christian Ehrenhoff, a good defender. But they picked up Matt Molson, Brian Gionta on as wingers, Sam Reinhart the center, and then Josh Georges and Andre Mazeros. He's a defender. And let's be honest here. We can't expect more out of this group. It's possible, you know what, they're a candidate for tanking, but they've traded away their premier goalie last season, Ryan Miller, who's basically the face of this franchise. You know what, Bugadas, tell me, to tank or not to tank? That is the question.
You know what? I think it'd be honestly best for their organization to tank, but I just feel like no one's really gonna want to. I think they might do it just on accident. They're just that bad.
Let's be honest here. Them trying not to tank may be actually worse than them trying to tank. It's a possibility.
That's very likely. The Sabres,
well,
I don't know what they were doing trading away Ryan Miller.
No,
but they're definitely focused on the future.
It's not tanking, it's focusing on the future. Remember
and
that.
Not putting the best lineup out there.
Exactly. Focusing on the future by tanking. Yeah, let's be honest here. The Sabres could be worse than last year. 20 wins would probably be a good season for them. 20 wins is a solid season. I think they're probably the worst team in the NHL. To be honest with you. They have an okay core, but it's too good of a draft year next year to be trying. All right.
And they're going to have 3 first-round picks, by the way.
They are a nasty team if they get the right players in the next couple of years. All right, we move on to the Red Wings of Detroit. Last year, 4th in the Atlantic, barely make the playoffs, eliminated by Boston in the first round. I mean, this is a Red Wings team that has been a perennial playoff member, playoff contender. They're lucky they were in the East last year, otherwise they would have missed the playoffs, but they were. I mean, look at this. They're a team that had a couple losses in Legwand and Bertuzzi. No big pickups, and the problem is they're just an old team. Because Pavel Datsyuk, Daniel Alfredsson, there's just a lot of old players on this team. It's Henrik Zetterberg. I mean, these are guys that were good 5-10 years ago. But the problem is when you have guys that were good 15-10 years ago, you're probably having an issue. So, you know what? I'm going to make a bold prediction. I think they're missing the playoffs for the first time in, it must be 15 years now.
I think the Red Wings, they need to either make some big moves and improve greatly, or just cut all ties and start doing what the Sabres are doing, looking towards the future. Because if you get into a position where you're right in the middle, not able to move up in the draft, but not a contender, that's a horrible place to be in this league. And I don't think they're going to be happy getting a first-round exit from the playoffs every year.
All right, so the NHL doesn't quite have the same top 15 system anymore in each conference, like you have it straight laid out. But I gotta say, the worst spot to be in a conference is 11th.
Yeah.
Because you were almost there, but you weren't bad either. It's kind of awful.
You're not in a position to win, but you can't get better either. That's the problem. You're not bad enough.
Yeah,
that's where in the NBA the Rockets were there for a while. You just can't move.
It's like the friend zone, guys. At some point, you just gotta let it go.
You have to bring that up.
You gotta let it go at some point. You gotta let it go.
And that's exactly what you have to do with Zetterberg and Alfredsson. I think you either have to get someone big and win now, or just cut all ties.
All right, we move to a team last year, 7th in the Atlantic, but luckily, I won't say stumbled upon the first pick, but they got it. And so Aaron Ekblad is joining this team as well as Jussi Jokinen, Dave Bolland, and Willie Mitchell, who's a pretty good defender. They lost Tom Gilbert and Ed Jowanowski. It's tricky for a young team, but they did bring back Roberto Luongo. They have been good in a couple years. They kind of go back and forth. There's a good amount of additions, but it's hard to tell what they're going to be. I choose to look on the pessimistic side with this team. I don't think Ekblad is really ready to play in the NHL game. He's a defender, and I don't think he has the physicality necessary to win in this league. I think he should be sent back to the juniors. I think the Panthers should look to the future. And, yeah, that sums it up. Nick?
I think the future is there. I think they just gotta, wait on it. Maybe 1 or 2 years. No bitterness against Juicy J for going there. Still love the guy. I think the Panthers can be good. I'm not sure if it's going to be this year, next year, 2 years from now. I really can't tell. I can tell you they're not going to get too far if they do make the playoffs. And just to be safe, I'm going to say they probably don't, but they can be good. Potentially.
All right, we're gonna move on because we do need to hustle up. All right, the Montreal Canadiens are a very interesting team. They're in the Atlantic last year, but they were eliminated by the New York Rangers in the conference finals. They've had Tom Gilbert and Pierre, pardon my French, Pierre Parentois. Parentois?
Parentois?
I'm thinking Parentois. But they did lose Thomas Vanek, who, let's be honest here, is the most traded player in league. I'm pretty sure he went to 3 or 4 teams last year. I mean, he bounced around. I don't even know what's up with him. Then you got Josh Georges. Georges. I've stumbled his name twice.
He's gorgeous.
I think it's gorgeous. And then you've got Brian Gionta and Daniel Briere. They did lose a little bit, but Carey Price was fantastic in the playoffs and in the regular season. I don't see, if he gets hot, and with PK Subban, probably the best defender in the league, you know what? I think this could be one of the better years in Habs history. Not Habs history, excuse me. In Habs recent history. Habs
yeah, I was going to say, aren't they one of the best teams ever?
Yeah, they are the best team ever in this. But I got to say, I think this is a year where they're serious contenders for the Cup. And I don't think I would have said that before last year when they made the conference finals. I think they've matured as a team. They haven't had any losses that I look at and then say, ugh. So, you know what? I think they're going to be very good. And I'm going to talk about them more later when we get into our different picks. Nick.
Honestly, I think if Carey Price didn't get hurt, they probably could have made a run at the Cup. So, with that being said, I'm not sure if they'll come on top of this division because I think Boston's a serious contender. But I think the Canadiens have a real good shot at the Cup this year.
All right, we got three more
in the playoffs.
We got 3 more teams, and let's try to do them in 3 minutes, shall we? All right.
We'll try.
Key additions for the Ottawa Senators: Alex Chiazin, and David Legwand. Chiazin, sure. David Legwand, and then they lost Jason Spezza, which is like a stab to the heart for that team. I mean, he was their captain. Not captain. Excuse me. He was one of those players, along with Daniel Alfredsson. I mean, it's hard losing Daniel Alfredsson and Jason Spezza back-to-back years. You know what? We need to know who this team is. But they do have Bobby Ryan. They have Erik Karlsson. But it's hard to see them after being 5th last year, 37, 31, and 14. They were 5th in the Atlantic. They were close. And I really liked this team last year, and I don't like them this year. And it hurts me to say that. But their goaltending is too shaky. And I think you need a good goalie, and I don't think that Craig Anderson can hold up for an entire season.
Again, I think they're one of those teams right on the border, and they have to do something. They either have to get good quick or blow it up. I like Karlsson. I really do, but he's not enough.
All right. Good point. Yeah, it looks like it could be a down year for the Senators. Moving on to the Lightning. 2nd in the Atlantic last year. Pretty big. A team that a lot of people are talking about this year. 46, 27, and 9. 2nd in the Atlantic. Eliminated by Montreal in the first round. Montreal kind of had a pretty good run at knocking out good teams in this division. I mean, they didn't have a huge loss. Ryan Malone's a pretty big loss. Sammy Salo. Nick Thompson. Penguin. Anders Lindback is the only reason Anders Lindback hurts because he was their backup, but Ben Bishop, who we'll talk about in a little bit, that'll be interesting. Then you got Anton Strawman, Jason Garrison, Brian Boyle, Brendan Morrow, Jonathan Drouin. I mean, the additions to the team obviously are better than this